The best way for me to explain Netlify CMS is to show it to you in action. Netlify CMS is an open source project that is worked on by employees on Netlify, but is completely separate as far as technology is concerned from Netlify, except for one connection point, which is the Git Gateway. You can use Netlify CMS without Netlify, and there's some documentation on that. We're just going to show why you might pick it over some of the other headless CMS options. And the key is to understand that it's a Git-based CMS. So there's no extra server to pay for or maintain. It's all within your Git together with your source code. There's an explanatory video here with more details, but we're going to be going over much of that in our course today. And so let's actually see this in action. Netlify uses Netlify CMS, of course, especially for the blog, for example. So here, these are blog posts that are drafted and published and previewed and edited all in Netlify CMS. And that's a very wonderful thing. So let's take a look at how this works internally. In the URL, there's a special endpoint that we've set up called /admin endpoint, and that gets us to the Netlify CMS admin panel. And Netlify CMS with the Git Gateway uses Netlify identity to log in. We'll explain all this integration, but fortunately, you already know what Netlify identity is, and this is a very familiar widget to you by now. I'm going to sign in with my employee email and my password. And now we can see the admin backend of Netlify. So we have a few collections named here and some blog posts. And also you're able to see them sort of spread out or in layers. We haven't really set it up. We just put titles on just because that's all we need. You can also see workflow and media, and we'll talk about those two in turn. But let's go ahead and start a new blog. And I'm just going to cancel. And so you can see here two things. There's a left-hand side with a bunch of form fields, and on the right-hand side, a preview. And so this is very cool. It's actually a full React app that looks exactly like our blog. So let's have a sample post. Test post, please ignore. Lorem ipsum. I have my author picture pre-registered, so my author picture shows up as well. And note, if I change the date, it shows up on both sides. You can select a pre-generated topic. You can add terms. I can type in some text, but then I can also write in Markdown, which is very nice for code. I can even configure custom fields, like for example, this tweet field, which will show what the tweet looks like, describe in some metadata. There's a special field in this editor interface where you can actually add images as well, which is not usual for Markdown editors, but you can do that right here. And you can choose a new image to upload. For example, I can upload a recent image of mine, and I can select it to be included, and that will show up in my preview, which is very nice. Me. And I can collapse this and keep editing my content down below. So all this is very nice, and this is especially if you're working with non-technical audience, but then also just for yourself if you write a lot and you just want a nicer editing experience. You can notice the scroll sync as I go up and down, which is very, very cool. And so yeah, once I'm happy, I can save. And with Netlify CMS, that does a couple things. That actually kicks off a PR that sends to the GitHub repo of netlify.com. And then it immediately has the status over here to check for a preview. So right now, this is in a draft mode because I just saved, I haven't published. And I can set the draft status to in review or ready as well. And we'll talk about the editor workflow. But first, let's talk about this check for preview tag. So what this does in the backend, let's have a look at the source code for the www. So you can see that Netlify bot has already created a Netlify CMS page. It's adding that file that I did in Markdown. The image that I had already was uploaded. And you can see the deploy preview down here working on the build. So this is why there's a check for preview button, because you can click this if you want and continually check for preview. There's no preview yet, so this is still showing check for preview. But this is for basically eliminating any differences between the WYSIWYG preview and the final article. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can set up the correspondence between the in-panel sort of live preview as well as the deploy preview, which is almost basically the real thing. Like, you know that based on continuous deployment, once you merge this PR in, it will look exactly like it does in the preview. Once that deploy is live, you can actually see that status update in the PR and obviously collaborate with your coworkers inside a PR. But also inside the CMS, you can actually hit check for preview again, and it will turn into a view preview button. And when you view the preview, this will be a deploy preview with your post exactly as it will be inside of your actual content. And you can see the entire site index together with that, which is very nice. So let's talk a little bit about editor workflow. I'm going to hit back and check out the workflow section. So the post that I've made is now in the draft section, together with some of the content that I have. I can delete, I can publish, I can drag it through. If, for example, I have a reviewer that I'm working with, or I'm just sort of working this in progress, whereas this is just more of an icebox. And once it's ready to publish, I can just take this over to the ready section and either automatically publish it or manually hit the publish button whenever I'm ready to launch my new blog post. Over in the media section, we can check on the images that I've uploaded. Nothing much else here. But now let's talk a little bit about how it's configured. How come we can upload both images as well as Markdown? And that's actually all in the configuration that's contained within the repo itself. So here I'm in the backend of the blog page, and Netlify CMS has a special config file called config.yaml. And here you basically spec out all the details that Netlify CMS needs to know about your site. So we'll talk about collections later, but that's basically the schema of all the content that you enter in. But basically, you specify your backend, your site URL, your publish mode, which we opted into editorial workflow for a more fine-grained process, as well as specifying a media folder, which is where we want the GitHub bot to store our uploaded images, and the public folder, which is where we're going to serve our images from. So a lot of times this is a nested folder, so we just want to tell Netlify CMS where to actually expect it. So that's the difference between the media and the public folder. Let's talk a little bit about what this word backend means. That's a verboten word in Netlify, but really we're just using one of many configurations for integration with Git providers. So obviously the one that we lead with is Git Gateway, which integrates with Netlify Identity. We'll talk about this. And this has to be measured in contrast with the others, which is integrations with GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. So let's have a look at these backends. What's common among GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket is that all your CMS users need to have commit access through the authentication services of each of these services. So GitLab, you need to log in with your GitLab account. Bitbucket, same thing. And GitHub, same thing. And then they can commit. Obviously, you may not want to give everyone commit rights to your code. You may just want them to be able to send in content and let the bot take care of it. And that's what Git Gateway does for you, together with Netlify Identity. And that's the tight integration there. Fortunately, you know everything about Netlify Identity already. So what I'm going to show you is just the documentation for Git Gateway, which is over here. And it explains how you can set it up if you don't want to use Netlify, because this is an open source project. And you can see all the source code over here in the Git Gateway repo. So to be clear, you don't need Netlify identity to use Netlify CMS. It's just a nice to have because you want your publishers and your authors and your editors to be able to review content without being able to commit to code. And in all these other options, you have to give them commit rights because that's how it would work. Okay, so that's it for our intro to Netlify CMS. But we're going to get our hands dirty a little bit and actually set a new thing up from a template. So that's the best way to start with it. And I don't know if I've been clear enough at the beginning, but Netlify CMS does not depend on React. It uses React for the editor, but it's amazingly tech agnostic. Like it works with Hugo, it was Jekyll, Middleman, Gatsby. And that's pretty freaking amazing given that it's also showing you a live preview. But it is true that the largest number of users come from the Gatsby and React ecosystem. So we're going to have a look at how to set that up. So one thing we're going to start from is a template, and that's the template that's maintained by the Netlify CMS team. I do want to pay some special attention to the URL of this template, of this deploy to Netlify button. So if you watched my earlier videos, you should be aware of what the deploy to Netlify button does. But basically it helps you set up a fork. Here we're actually doing something new, which is appending this @stack equals CMS flag. And that just basically helps to set up a Git Gateway plus Netlify identity setup just from a single deploy to Netlify button click, which is the standard one that you see with any Netlify open source site. Okay, so let's deploy from a template. So I'm going to click here, and it's going to set up that one-click deploy that we all know and love. So I signed in, and now it's creating a repo name. I'm just going to leave it unchanged. Actually, I already have the same name here, so I'm just going to add a 2 to it. But notice that it's actually showing that it's going to set up Git Gateway and identity as well, just because we added that little tag at the end of @stack equals CMS. If you didn't have this, you could set it up yourself just by clicking a few buttons, but this just makes it a one-click deploy type of situation. So that's always very handy to have, especially when getting started with something. Okay, so we have a new site, and just for good measure, we can see that identity is already set up for me, as well as in the settings, I can see that Git Gateway is already set up as well. And that would be in settings, identity, all the way down here with the Git Gateway services. And you can set this up yourself if you choose. Let's actually take a quick look at what this one clean deploy gets us. So let's head over here. So we get a nice landing page with some content down here that hopefully we can customize, as well as some stories from a blog. And you can read more on the /blog. And obviously here we see that lazy loading fanciness from Gatsby. But otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward blog that you can see. There's also a products page that you can edit, and a contact page with Netlify forms and other form examples down below. Let's take a look at what that looks like from the source code perspective. So when I clicked that deploy to Netlify button, I also cloned that source code. And again, in the Netlify CMS world, you should always start with the config.yaml file. So let's have a look at the static folder admin route config.yaml. It's pretty much always in a route like that, where the final route will be foobar.netlify.com/admin, right? And then it will just look for a config.yaml up in there. We got the backend config file. And again, just to note that all this is actually in the docs. We're not really covering anything new here. I'm just explaining it as I go along in words that I could understand. So here we're setting the backend with the Git Gateway. There's other backend options that we already talked about. And then we have a media and public folder. Again, already explained that this is where you want to store it inside of Git, and this is where it's going to live in the public URL. And now we come to these concepts of collections. And so we want to talk about collections, folder collections versus file collections. Folder is actually the easier one, and folder you can think about as just templates for your blog, right? So when I edit my blog, I want to be able to specify a date, have that be broken out to year, month, day, and slug, and the slug will be created for me. The template key can be given to me as well, and I can have some other fields like description, featured posts, and you can notice that I'm using all these widgets, which are text, boolean, image, markdown list, date, time, and these are all default widgets that come with Netlify CMS. So let's have a look at the widgets, and these are all the common widgets. You can see the options available to you and some notes on how they behave. And let's have a look at them in action, because I feel like we're still too abstract in terms of what we're doing over here. So let's fire up the page and let's go to admin. Now I haven't set this up for invites, so here it's only login. So I need to let it be able to sign up. Obviously you want to be very careful with this, because once people sign up, they can also contribute content. And you don't want just anyone to sign up. So let's change our registration preferences to open. And I'll just go ahead and add like a GitHub external provider as well. And as you know, the Netlify identity widget will pick that up. So now I can sign up, or I can just also continue with GitHub. And I'm just going to make a new blog post and just walk through that process again. But this time, we're going to have the schema open in front of us and compare them from side by side. So here we'll see that we have a title. The template key is hidden, and this determines the layout in Gatsby's perspective. We'll look at the title, and we'll try and say lorem ipsum. We'll have a publish date with the datetime widget. There used to be a date widget, but now that's deprecated, so you always use the datetime widget. That doesn't seem to display in our template over here, and we can go fix that if we want to. The description, I can just say foo, bar, baz, whatever. Featured posts, yeah, make it a featured post, why not? I'll check an image, I can reuse a selected image, or I'll just make my own, because why not? Okay, chuck that in there. Upload, choose selected. And I'll type in some text. I'll just grab some of this stuff, hook it in there. Maybe I'll make this a markdown thing. Okay, cool. And that looks like some content. And tech, JavaScript, whatever. Publish it. Notice that I don't have editorial workflow set up. So when I publish, it immediately creates that PR. That's currently rebuilding, so give me a sec. Let's head to the deploys. So you saw me cancel that deploy over there because I'm just uploading the image. I actually need to build the blog. One thing that we can look at while this is building is also look at the PR that's happening in our project. So over here, there's no PR because we haven't set up editorial workflow, but the code has actually committed it directly for me. Including that date time that I talked about, as well as the description, featured posts, all those fields that we specified in our config. Okay, so the new site is live, and we'll go over and refresh, and we should be able to see the new blog post, and there's no date in the preview, and that's as planned. So the other type of collection, so that's the folder collection that we talked about over here, and that's basically setting up all these templates to go into each of these blog post folders that have been declared. And that's a pretty clear and intuitive way to use a CMS. The other way to use this Netlify CMS is as a file collection. And here we call our file collection pages. And we've got a bunch of different pages. We've got the landing page, we've got the about page, we've got the products page. And the idea here is that there will not be repeated copies of these. These are just individual files. And we're using the CMS as a way to edit the content of these files dynamically. And Netlify CMS will be smart enough to handle that. So let's have a look at how that works on the inside. Again, we're going to go into the content manager. And so the blog, as we maintain over here, is the folder collection, and the file collection is all these pages, which we named over here. We head to the pages, and we can edit any one of these things. So I'll just edit the landing page. The landing page has these widgets set up on the left, and this preview on the right, which, as you already saw, is pretty much the exact same as what is in production. So we can just say Netlify CMS is really great. CMSing without a CMS server. And we can blah, blah, blah. Look at all of this awesomeness of widgets and editing and WYSIWYGness. This is really, really hard to do. I honestly don't know how they do this. But I'm glad that they do. So let's save this. Again, it's directly hitting to publish. We can obviously set up the editorial workflow by configuring that inside of the field over here. Just add a editorial workflow field. And now when I look at the commits again, I should be able to see the latest commit that we're updating the pages of the title and subheading. And that does, again, hooks right back into Netlify and kicks off a new build. Okay, so that's about it. The last piece that we didn't cover is the filter field. That's going to be very handy for basically filtering out by language. So for example, I want to edit in English or Spanish and have different layouts and widgets for those things. Those are very, very helpful as well. And probably the most common question for most blogging situations is needing to schedule posts. Because there's no running server, you need a way to make blog posts go live at a point in time. So the natural solution is to set your blog post date at some point in the future, and then you set up your builds to run every day, every minute, every hour, whatever it is. And once that time has passed for the blog post to be published, then that build will pick it up. So essentially, all you need to do is set up a cron job. And Zapier is a really good way to do it. So the Zapier integration with Netlify lets you just use the Zap, and you can start a deploy of Netlify sites on a daily schedule, which is pretty cool. There are other methods to do it. This article from Flavio Copes essentially tells you about the Zapier integration with a little bit more documentation and screenshots, which I highly recommend. And for those who want to try out something more serverless without paying for Zapier, you can try to set up your own with serverless framework. And literally scheduling a publish is as simple as leaving a comment inside of GitHub. So those are very interesting ways to schedule posts. But essentially, if you were paying attention during the Netlify build section where we talked about build hooks, then you can essentially fire off from any old device. You can have a Raspberry Pi that sends a ping to your build server, all of that good stuff. The last section of what we're going to cover today has to do with media. So far we've been uploading media directly to our Git folder. That obviously has scalability issues for large images and large numbers of images. And so you may want to explore one of the media partners that we have. So probably the best known is Cloudinary. Cloudinary essentially lets you sign up for free, and then they'll manage your images for you. All you need to do is add a media library key to your config.yaml and give them your Cloudinary cloud name as well as your API key, And that's about it. Netlify will upload there instead of your GitHub. Similar principle for Uploadcare. Uploadcare is another service that just focuses on asset storing, and not just images, but just everything in general. And a similar thing, you just sign up for them and then give your public key. And lastly, we'll talk about Netlify Large Media, which actually is a Git LFS implementation. So you don't store your images inside of Git, you actually store it somewhere else in a Netlify Large Media server, and then Netlify will proxy and give you the right sizes of your images, audio, video for you without bloating your repository. So we'll actually talk about that in the next section on Netlify add-ons for everything else. But apart from that, you should be all set to go to set up your site with Netlify CMS.